Julie. There she is. Okay, let me invite her. My volume is up. Whoa, my eyes. Oh, sorry. My volume was not turned all the way up. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, this is Julie Murray, to those who don't know. She is the sister of Maura Murray. Am I saying her name? Is it Maura or Maura? Because I know your accent always sounds like Maura.
Yeah, it's like Laura with an M.
Yeah.
So
Maura.
Yeah.
Maura. Okay. I always say Maura, but then I hear you say Maura. I'm like, is that just her accent? Because I know your family has like, your dad especially has like that thick accent.
Yeah.
How is your dad, by the way?
He's good. I was just up visiting him this past weekend, and he's doing good.
Awesome. So, so I guess we'll just start. So your sister's case was, I've always been into true crime since I was a kid, but your sister's case was like the first one I ever heard on the internet, like through the internet.
Yeah.
And so Maura's case is kind of, I think, started almost the internet true crime thing, if you want. I don't know what you want to call it, but you know, I remember because people would always present it in such a creepy way. I know I think that's back before people knew what empathy was when it came to like true crime. Unfortunately, I know you talk a lot about that. But yeah, it's her case has always been just one of the most baffling stories because I've covered a lot of missing people cases, and it's, you always say that phrase, vanished off the face of the earth, or they poofed into thin air, and you're like, oh, that's not possible. But like with Maura, it's like, I kind of feel like that's probably an option because it's just so baffling. But let's start with, tell us about Maura. Tell us about your sister. Who was she, or is she? What kind of person she was? Give us some insight, I guess, into her.
Yeah, I mean, Maura has kind of been boiled down to the few decisions that she made before she disappeared. And what people forget is she had a whole life before that. So she went missing when she was 21. And you see this across a lot of true crime coverage where a victim is just boiled down to the days, the moments before the tragedy, and people just want to focus on the tragedy and not the actual human being that is missing or murdered. And so that's a big thing that I've been trying to shed light on and advocate for. So I love it when people ask me, who is this human being that, that disappeared? So Maura, she was 21 when she went missing. And she was my little sister by 2.5 years. We grew up in a small town on the South Shore of Massachusetts, and you'll hear my accent come in and out. I live in Virginia now, and I've been away for so long, so the accent kind of goes away. But when I go back and visit, or when I talk to my dad, it comes back. So I say sister and things like that. But Maura was talented in so many different ways. She was an outstanding athlete. She, was just an all-star runner. But she could play any sport. And so growing up, before we fell in love with running, we would play basketball, soccer, softball. We'd make up games. So she was very athletic, and everyone in my family is very athletic. And so we played sports growing up, but Maura was also really, really smart. So she scored almost a perfect score on her SATs, getting 1420 on her SATs. So, almost like brilliant level, especially in math. But what I like to talk about Maura, remind people, not only was she a human and she's missing, she was so humble and kind. And that's why I continually talk about empathy, because that's how Maura would want her case to be treated and how she would treat other people. So as talented as she was, both academically and athletically, she was so humble. She would never be the one to brag about her accomplishments or anything like that. And she'd go out of her way to help people. She always wrote handwritten thank you notes or just for whatever notes. And I have a whole stack of notes that she wrote me. So that's super precious to me. But just, overall introverted, kind of like myself and everybody else in my family, and flawed as we all are. Wasn't perfect and made mistakes, made poor decisions. But at the end of the day, she was studying to be a nurse, following in my mother's footsteps and also my grandmother's footsteps. So, overall a pretty decent human.
And her wanting to be a nurse, I think kind of just even demonstrates further the type of person she is, because that's work that requires a lot of empathy, a lot of sympathy, a lot of heart and love and care and all that. So I think that also goes to show, because she had transferred right from I forgot the other school's name. I know she was at UMass. Right, when this happened. She transferred from West Point?
West Point, yep.
West Point, okay, yeah. And that's because she wanted to go to nursing school.
Right. And so I got accepted to West Point. There's a big, long process to get in. And she kind of followed in my footsteps. She actually didn't even apply to any other school. And she was getting recruiting letters from all these top name schools, Brown, Yale, Harvard. And she's like, nope. I'm going where Julie's going. And, I said, I thought she'd love it, and she didn't love it. But, at West Point and in the Army, you don't have the option to be a nurse. And so that may have influenced her decision to want to leave.
Yeah. And you and her were like really, really close, right? Like you guys are like best friends pretty much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was 2.5 years older, but she was my best friend. We ran, when you're runners, especially long distance runners, you spend lots of miles together, like hundreds of miles, and you just start talking about whatever. And so some of my best memories are while we were just chatting about randomness while we were running. And so we were super close, and yeah.
That's awesome. So I guess then we can kind of lead into what's the event. We don't have to like focus on like the things from, because like you were saying earlier, like the poor decisions or whatever the case may be, because that may not have anything to do with anything. So I maybe, you never know. But what is the event that actually happened? So I guess start from the beginning of, that it was February 9th, 2004, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened that day?
Well, February 9th, 2004 was a Monday. Classes had just started at UMass because they had winter break. And early in the morning on that Monday, 3:32 a.m., Maura emails her nursing school homework assignment. And her homework assignment was to look up maternity terms. So she had to define these maternity terms that dealt with pregnancy. So she goes ahead and she sends her email off. And then after she does that, like super late, she starts to look up directions to Vermont and New Hampshire, which is weird.
Does she know anyone in Vermont or New Hampshire?
Right, yeah. I mean, we had vacationed up in New Hampshire our whole life, but it wasn't like we had immediate family there. Okay. So she does some internet searches, and then presumably she gets some sleep, and then later on, mid-afternoon, on the day she went missing, she starts up some more searches on her computer, and she's searching for, again, directions to Vermont and New Hampshire, Burlington specifically. She sends an email to her professors saying that she'd be out because of a death in the family, and there is no death in the family. So that's kind of the first red flag. Well, second red flag. The searching for directions early was the first red flag. So she makes this typical college excuse of a death in the family, where the professors aren't going to ask any additional questions because it's the oldest trick in the book. You don't press any further when you say that. So at that point, it seems like she's kind of hastily preparing some sort of plan, but she didn't tell me or anybody else in my family. So then she calls a 1-800 number at a ski resort in Burlington, Vermont. And it was just an information line. So basically they just said weather conditions on the slopes. It was Stowe, Vermont. And then she calls a condo owner in Bartlett, New Hampshire. So one thing that I always like to point out is the two places she called are very different in terms of geographic areas. They're separated by about 2 hours. So that's weird.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's like her plan is to go north. That's basically all that we can get from that. And then she plays phone tag with her boyfriend. She doesn't connect with him. And then she calls a fellow nursing student to say that she wanted to return some borrowed clothes, and her nursing classmate said, "No, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal." She eventually does return the clothes to that nursing classmate who was taking a nap at the time. So she knocks on the door. The classmate doesn't answer, but later finds this bag of borrowed clothes that obviously Maura had dropped off. So that's a huge regret for her because that would have been one interaction with Maura the day that she disappeared, because we don't have that. We don't have anyone that had interaction with her. So then she leaves campus. She goes to a liquor store. She purchases about $40 worth of liquor, and she returns some cans, and she had like 78 cans, and she was able to get $3.95 back, which is, you know, super weird thing to do. And it's one of the data points that I'm like, okay, if her plan was to disappear, why take that time to return these cans for $3? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So then, or before she went to the liquor store, she went to an ATM and withdrew $280. So she's got her $280, goes to the liquor store, gets her $40 worth of liquor, gets her $3.95 for cans, and then she heads north. And so the last known cell phone activity on her phone was at 4:37 p.m. And that was her checking her voicemail. She never tells anybody that I know of where she was going, what she was doing. At some point, either before she went to the ATM or after, she stopped by to pick up accident forms because she had an accident in my father's car on the Saturday prior to her disappearance. So those forms were found in her car. So we've got the 4:37 timestamp of her last cell phone activity, and then just nothing until 7:27, where this witness hears a loud thud outside her window in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Haverhill is it's confusing. Haverhill is kind of the town, and then the section of the town that Maura went missing is Woodsville. So we're talking Woodsville, but people use those terms synonymously. So the witness sees a black sedan outside her window. She calls 911 and reports vehicle off the road. Then a few minutes later, a bus driver returning home from a ski trip, the first witness's neighbor, drives by around this kind of sharp corner It's about 90 degrees, and sees the same vehicle off the road. So he stops, and he has different variations of his interaction with the woman, who we have to assume is Maura because she's missing. It's her car. And asked if she needs help, and she declines and said she called AAA, roadside assistance. But he knew that couldn't be true because there's no cell phone service even today in that area. So he said, okay, got it. Then he goes back to his house, which was within sight, only about 150 yards down the road, and makes the second 911 call at 7:43 p.m. And just a reminder, this is New Hampshire. It was in the low 20s this night. The roads were dry, but there were about 2 feet of previous snow accumulations. So it wasn't like it was an active snowstorm. The roads were dry that night, but it was very dark. Then 3 minutes later at 7:46, the first responding officer comes to the scene and finds Maura's black Saturn sedan locked and abandoned, and she's never been seen again.
So, okay, so the last call was at 7:43, and then the police arrive at 7:46. So the last physical sighting of Maura was at what time? Like that someone can actually say they saw her?
That would be the bus driver. It would have been, and this is just a guess, it would have been between 7:27 and 7:43. So probably around like 7:33, 7:35-ish.
Wow, so that's like a few minutes where between when someone can confirm they saw her as to when police arrived and she was no longer there. Right. So how does a person vanish that quickly? When the police arrive and they obviously look at the car, do they do an immediate search of the area?
No.
They don't. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when the first responding officer arrives, he does just a cursory search looking for footprints just around the area, and he doesn't see anything. Okay. And at that point, he goes to the first witness's house and says, "Where's the girl?" Which is kind of odd, because how did he know it was a girl? Because the first witness, the Westmans, didn't come out of their house to investigate. So it was only Butch, the bus driver, that knew it was a woman, and he called 3 minutes before the officer showed up. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, there's just so many little details and nuance to it. It's hard to wrap your head around.
And so as far as you know, they didn't see any, because this is in the snow, so there wasn't any actual footsteps in the snow leading from the car. And there would have been if she had walked away from the car. But also, why would she have walked away from the car? That's the other question.
Yeah, I mean, there's speculation that she could have been drinking. It's possible. She did have alcohol in the car. She had an open bottle of wine or box of wine that she purchased the Saturday before, and that was behind the driver's seat. And there was red liquid kind of all over the driver's area and on the driver's side door. So she could have been drinking, and so that may have been a reason for her to want to get out of Dodge.
Okay, so if the police were coming, she'd be like, "Oh my God, there's alcohol in my car. I can't be here with the cops." Allegedly, possibly. That's just a thought. So, the crash itself, they believe she ran into a tree, correct? That's what they've said.
Well, that's what's on the police report, but we had a vehicle reconstructionist look at the car, look at the accident scene, and he determined that the damage wasn't consistent with hitting a tree. So he thinks that she hit the snowbank.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because I've seen obviously we've all seen the damage of her car. It looks so almost minimal, as if you were to hit a tree. I feel like there would have been more damage. So actually, I guess running into a snowbank makes more sense.
Yeah, but even the I don't think he specifically said, he didn't say snowbank. Let me retract that. He said an object that was at an angle. It's all the scientific terminology that but the damage looks like it was a fixed object. And so that's what the vehicle reconstructionist report states, that it was a fixed object and her car hit it at an angle less acute than 90 degrees. So
not a head-on collision to a tree, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And they've never, and her car, the car is still in evidence, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's still, okay. And what was, other than the alcohol, did they find in her car? Was there anything of relevance? I know they had was there clothing items and stuff in there, I believe?
Yeah, there was a random assortment of clothes. And I actually did a TikTok on this because it's very random, and it's not like she had a well thought out packing list, because she didn't have any warm weather gear. She didn't have a hat. She didn't have any boots. She had one sock, a singular sock. Just not the type of gear that you would pack to go to New Hampshire in February.
One sock found in the car?
Yeah, one sock, yeah. And there were what caught my eye was that there were no dressy clothes. So it wasn't like it was, I've thought, was she going to meet somebody? But if she were going to meet somebody, you'd think she'd have some dressy clothes. And it was just like a sweatshirt, a long sleeve shirt, one pair of pants. Now, we don't know what she took with her, because her backpack is missing. It's still missing. So we don't know what was in the backpack.
Okay. So she could have packed some kind of travel bag of clothing, but it wouldn't have been enough if she was planning on actually leaving permanently. A backpack wasn't going to be enough to pack that kind of stuff.
Right. And another thing that was significant that was found was she did bring textbooks. So she brought her schoolwork with her.
Okay.
So that's another data point for me that indicates, okay, if she was bringing her textbooks with her, she planned to keep up with schoolwork. Who does that if they're just trying to disappear?
Not to mention, you said she submitted her assignment, right? The morning of her disappearance. If someone's planning to not go back to school, why would you submit your work, and why would you bring your school books with you just to keep studying? So that all indicates that there was always a plan for her to come back, but she never came back. What is there? I mean, I know you have your family's theories about why was she potentially going there?
To be honest, we still don't know.
Yeah.
We don't
There's
know.
No, because she had a boyfriend at the time, right? Or were they split up at that point?
She did have a boyfriend at that time, but they were long distance. So he was in Oklahoma at an Army base, and she was at UMass. So they did the typical break up, get back together, kind of do loop thing that young 20-somethings do. But at the time that she disappeared, they were together.
Okay. But he was way far away, so he couldn't have anything to do with, one, her disappearance, and two, the reason why she was driving to New Hampshire, Vermont. He would have had no connection to that.
He was in Oklahoma, so
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Man. So what whenever I hear her story, I always think about that bus driver. I always get weird vibes from him, and he's no longer alive, correct?
Correct. Yep. He actually moved out of the area and moved to Florida a couple years after the disappearance, and then has since passed away.
And he was technically the last person to have visually seen her.
That we know of.
That you know of, right?
So it's like it's so many different questions. You know, why was she there in the first place? Where was she going? What was her plan? But then whatever her plan was, it really didn't matter because the accident changed her whole situation. Her circumstances were different.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think all the stuff I've seen about Maura's case before, people, like you were kind of saying earlier, like people were wanting to connect whatever personal issues she was having or whatever the case may be directly to the disappearance. But in the reality is those may be two completely different things. Like, she may have made this plan to get away for a while, and then also at the same time just so happened to get into this minor accident and ran into the worst possible person by sheer coincidence. And I think a lot of people want to, they focus so much on, like, you know, on her reasons for the trip as it being like the reason why she disappeared, if that makes sense. But the reality is that they may not be connected at all.
Yeah, and that's the other big issue with my sister's case, is that we don't know what we don't know. Right. And any little detail about the whole situation could be as important as it is insignificant. Mm-hmm. But we just don't know. So it's hard to discount anything until we find her. And that's so frustrating for a family. It's so frustrating living in that unknown of, well, you know, I get tips all the time. What about this? What about this? And I don't discount any of them because it could be significant, but it also could be nothing.
Right.
So you've got to balance that, and it can drive you insane.
I think one of the biggest obstacles Maura's case had was the fact that her case was one of the first cases really that made, like, that was like internet famous, if you will. And so you had like the whole like armchair detective movement, you know, like all of them are like bringing out these things that may not have any relevance. They may be misinformation, all of this crap that seemed to get like thrown onto her story because of the internet. And that was because this was in like the origins of like true crime on the internet. And so you had everyone wanting to think they knew what happened. And unfortunately that really like muddied down the waters of her story, of her case.
Yeah. Because Maura went missing the same week Facebook launched in 2004.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. Wow. And also a little fast fact here as well. The term podcast was first used 2 days after Maura disappeared.
Podcast?
Yeah. So podcast wasn't even a term until 2 days after Maura disappeared, when some reporter first wrote about it, I think in The Guardian. And so we're talking pre-podcast, you know, at the infancy of Facebook. And so here my family is up there in New Hampshire trying to figure out how we can mass produce flyers. So we're going to libraries and print shops, and we're trying to get all these flyers because that's the only reality that we knew at the time. So we've got this big stack of flyers, and we're boots on the ground, hoofing it, tacking up, nailing up these flyers to every telephone pole, gas station, restaurant in the area. Then all of a sudden, this thing called social media comes, you know, to be, and we're like, oh, whoa, there's a thing called Facebook where I can push a button and reach people all over the world and get mass awareness. And so initially, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And we're like, we know that somebody knows something. We know that if we get our face and name out there, someone's gonna come forward. And that was our thought process the weeks after the disappearance, and then months and then into years as, you know, social media became more prevalent. But then, like you said, internet sleuths came on, and they think that, you know, they have the missing piece, and they get stovepipe thinking, and they don't want to hear anything, and they're just locked into their theories, even when better information comes out, new information, they're just like, no, she is in the woods, or whatever their theory is. So, and then the misinformation started. And then you've got this powerful tool called the internet, where there's no way I could correct all that misinformation just as a family. We couldn't do it. Yeah. And so then her case got polluted with misinformation, and the same inaccurate stuff just was put on the internet. And once it's on the internet, even if you delete it, you can never fully delete it.
As they say, the internet is forever, as they say, unfortunately. I have a question, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this before, but what was the deal with that one dude on YouTube, like that creepy guy who was laughing in that, because when I saw that video, that's one of the first ways I actually heard about her case, was because of that guy's creepy. And I was like in my early 20s, I think, and that scared the daylights out of me. Like that video just on its own. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, the people just become obsessed with my sister's case for whatever their reason. And this guy became obsessed to the point where he made this creepy video that was basically mocking the disappearance in my family, and he put it out on one of the anniversaries of her disappearance, or I don't like the word anniversary, vigils of her disappearance. And he is in this basement, like cackling, and it's super creepy. It's so hurtful, and it's kind of re-traumatizing for a family member to see that, and then think that he could be a threat.
Because you have no idea. Like, this guy could be saying whatever. He could be, oh, I know exactly what happened to her. You know, like, you get this, like, image in your head now of this creepy man. Like, what is he trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's just sick. Like, to toy with a family, already vulnerable family, you know, desperate for answers, and then you're making this cryptic, creepy video in your basement. So, you know, eventually law enforcement obviously was made aware of it and looked into him. That's their term, their cookie cutter term that they give us. And we really didn't hear much more from it.
Do you think he was just a random dude, or do you think he may have any connection to this?
I just think he was just an obsessed person trying to just mess with my family.
Right. What has law enforcement been doing? Because it's almost 20 years now. 20 years in February, right? What has law enforcement been doing? Are they still like actively looking into this case?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I was just up in New Hampshire last weekend, and I had a meeting with law enforcement, and that was the first question I asked, like, what is happening? What is happening? And, you know, I can't get into too much detail, but basically they are getting a bunch of tips. They said Maura's case generates the most amount of tips in the entire state of New Hampshire.
I can imagine,
routinely. And I was like, okay, great. So what are you doing? And it was kind of like, it seemed like they were just in reactive mode. So I tried to press them about what are you doing to be proactive, you know? And so they told me a couple avenues that they're pursuing. But it seems like they're just filtering through the tips that they do get. And, you know, a lot of the tips are just total BS.
Yeah. especially with a case like Mauras, because Mauras isn't just like a case that people in New Hampshire, Massachusetts know about. Her case is like an internationally known case. And so you're always going to get those really stupid people who think it's like entertaining or funny to call in some BS tip, and they don't realize the effect it has on the investigation. Like, you're now taking a resource away to investigate something that's really just not anything, and it's stupid because someone wanted to prank or joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's sick and it's really hurtful. It's hurtful to my family, and my family's not the only one, but we definitely have gotten our share of just mean-spirited, just attention and trolling and things like that.
Yeah, I know your dad kind of went through some things a little bit with all of this, I think, at some point, but your dad is awesome, by the way. Every time I see him, I love the way he talks. Like, his accent and everything is just like, it's like he's just so cool. So just seems like a nice guy. But you can also tell he is genuinely, like, he wants his daughter back, in whatever way, shape, or form that may be. And that's kind of where I want to ask next is, do you guys think she is still with us or no?
Sadly, no, I don't think so. Based on the fact there have been no credible sightings. I mean, there have been hundreds, probably thousands of sightings, but none have been credible.
And that goes back into the fact that this is an internationally known story. There is no chance in hell, and I know Maura is very resourceful. She's very smart. She's probably capable of a lot, but there's no way you're going to be able to hide your identity when probably millions upon millions of people know who you are. And the fact that not one person can credibly say they know where she is, it's just...
Yeah. And the other thing is, nothing has ever been found. So not a single item of Maura's has ever been found. That, coupled with no credible sightings, and that she's never reached out to my family. My mom passed away. She had a long struggle with cancer. My older sister, Kathleen, passed away with a long struggle with cancer.
I didn't know she passed away.
Yeah. And so there's absolutely no way that if Maura was able to reach out to us, that she wouldn't have, because she was studying to be a nurse, and I've got both my mother and my sister in the hospital dying of cancer. It's just, if people knew Maura, they'd know what I'm talking about. There's no chance.
And I always want to encourage people, and I kind of had to be taught this relatively recently, is you got to listen to the family. The family is telling you who Maura was, who Maura is, and what they say is the credible information, and not this, like, whatever you hear on the internet from some random stranger. The first people you listen to is the family.
And I can see if my family acted suspicious. People always say that we're suspicious, but if you look at it from a practical standpoint, would the father of a missing woman scream on the governor of New Hampshire's office for the FBI if he was complicit? I would say no. Would I be doing TikTok lives 20 years later for my health?
Right. No. And you've been on, the story's been on like major like things. Like there was a documentary done, was it on Hulu or Peacock? I can't remember. It was like 6 or 7 episodes or something.
Yeah, the Oxygen series, yep.
Yeah, okay, that one. So, why would your family be involved in all of these things if you're guilty of something? It doesn't make any sense. Like, you'd be calling attention to your own selves. It's stupid. So it's like, and that's why I get into like, these armchair detectives always have their own stupid theories based on no evidence or anything. They're just saying it because it's easy for them. They don't have the connection to Maura like you did. You know, it's easy for them to be like, yeah, she was this person and her family is these people. It's easy to say that because you don't know who the hell they are.
Right. And you know, people that know us and knew Maura, they're not the ones saying it. It's strangers that have never met us.
Correct. Yeah. I wanted to ask, I forgot to ask this earlier. There were images, right, of her at the ATM withdrawing, was it 280 $280? Did you ever see the video of it or just the images?
I've only seen the still images, and I only saw them when they were given to the oxygen show. And so that was one of the things that I talked to law enforcement about this past weekend. First of all, they acknowledged that that was wrong. They could have handled that better. You know, I shouldn't have seen the last known images of my missing sister 13 years later with lights and cameras in my face.
Yeah.
Law enforcement should have said, here's a heads up, we're about to show these on national TV. I wanted you to see them, but no, that didn't.
You should have seen them anyway. I mean, like way beforehand.
Yeah, I should have seen them the 13 years prior, but no, I didn't. So I did ask to see the actual video that these still images were picked from, and we'll see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that may say like, oh, maybe someone was with her. Because I know people have thought like, was there someone with her on that trip? But then none of the witnesses said they saw anyone with her, like the bus driver. It was just her, correct?
Right, but there's a wrench thrown in all of this because the first witness, the Westmans, when they called in the first 911 call. Mm-hmm. She states to the operator that she sees a man smoking a cigarette. She later recants that and says...
That was the glow in the car, right? If I remember correctly?
Yeah. So that's minutes after the accident, and she's looking right out the window at it, had the best vantage point, and that's what she said. She later recanted that and said, no, maybe it was a light from a cell phone. So even from the jump, everything is just unclear. And that is another draw to the mystery. You know, why did the first witness with the best vantage point say that? I can't answer. I don't know.
How long in between did she recant that?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. I'm not too sure.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is she said it first. So that was the first thing she said, was that she saw, or I guess a glow in the car. Now I'm remembering it, like the report says a glow or something in the car, like a red glow or whatever.
No, the actual dispatch says man smoking cigarette.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm going by what's in black and white, printed from the original call, man smoking a cigarette.
The dispatcher would only write down what they're being told, I would hope.
Yeah.
I would hope. So, because that's a big thing. That's a huge deal. Like, because that changes everything. If there was someone else, but who the hell would it even be? And that's...
Yeah, I know. And then, but when the bus driver comes upon her, he states it was a single female.
Yeah. And there were no other cars parked near her. So it's not like someone parked the car, got out, got into her car, and for whatever random reason.
Yeah.
It's...
The other thing about this is people think of it as this remote location, and it is. You know, right down the road is the White Mountain National Forest, and there's basically nothing but trees. But where Maura crashed, there were 3 neighbors that could all see the crash site, and they were all looking at it. And so in that short little window where she went missing, all of those neighbors apparently looked away at the exact same time.
That's what I've always wondered too, is like you had, because I've seen the images with like the 3 houses that basically surround where her car was almost. And if did all 3 houses call 911?
No, only 2.
Just 2?
Yeah, the one on the side that her car was on, the eastbound lane. The person that owned that house looked out the window and he said he saw reverse lights.
Oh, okay. So
You
you do have 3 people who all claim they saw her car, and then in a matter of, how do they all turn away at the same time, and then all of a sudden she's gone? That's what baffled. That's why Maura's case, to me, that's the reason why it's always like people can't vanish into thin air. But what the hell? Like, she was there, and then literally we're talking minutes later, she is gone forever. And it's like, how? And it's so insane to me that happened.
Yeah, I know. I know.
That's why it's just one of the more, it's just so, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And, and there's no footprints walking away from the car. Were there any tire tracks or anything nearby that they could like say someone sped away, or there's no someone skidded out of the way because they took her or something? Nothing. Jesus. It's just it's so bizarre. Do you think someone could have taken her? Quickly?
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
So because it sounds like probably a complete stranger just happened upon her and then just took her. But do you think they would have taken her from the crash site, or would Maura have begun walking somewhere?
Again, I don't know. What's also kind of confusing about it is so she went missing on Monday night, and my family didn't find out about any of this until Tuesday early evening. So we had no idea. We were completely in the dark.
Oh.
So when we heard about it, we're frantically calling everybody, trying to figure it out. No one has a clue. So my dad is the first person from our family. He gets up early on Wednesday at dawn and drives up, and he drives directly to the crash site. The car wasn't there because it was towed the night prior. And he's looking around and he doesn't see any tire tracks. He doesn't see any footprints. And, and he didn't even see anybody to talk to. So then he goes from the crash site to the police station, and he's like, okay, what are we doing? What's the progress?
Yeah.
And they hadn't done anything because they just assumed that she'd show up. So no searches happened at 36 hours after the accident. So that window of opportunity where you're going to find a missing person was totally just gone because it wasn't taken seriously enough, especially on that Tuesday. I mean, they could have done something that Tuesday during the day, but nothing was done. So Wednesday, mid-afternoon is when the first official search happened. And New Hampshire Fish and Game went out and they had bloodhounds, and they didn't find anything. They had a heat sensing helicopter. They didn't find anything, but they did have the bloodhound take an item from her trunk, or the handler, and the bloodhound traced the scent in an easterly direction about 100 meters to the east, and lost the scent in the middle of the road. But here's the thing, that scent item that they took was a pair of brand new gloves that we don't think she ever wore, that were given to her for a Christmas gift, and they were leather gloves. So if she was going running or something like that, she's not going to put on leather gloves. Right. So I saw her, I didn't see her wearing these gloves. So we don't know if she ever wore those. So I don't put too much credibility in the scent item, or the scent, the dog tracking the scent. Even the head of the Fish and Game didn't have much confidence in it.
Did they ever try any other items, like something you guys know she wore or anything?
No, because they didn't ask us. My dad was right there. My dad was there. And of course, they didn't know anything about Maura. They didn't know anything about my family. So if they had asked my dad, he would have said, hey, any of her running gear. She wore it every day. She's a runner.
Those would have been really good items, because those might have contained, like, sweat and stuff. So more scent for them to pick up on.
Yeah, no.
I remember, wasn't there like a house nearby that something got hit on and that they wanted to dig?
Yeah. So early on in the investigation, there was a ton of local rumors, and we heard all kinds of stuff, horrific stuff. And one of the things that we heard was that this house right near where Maura went missing had some work done in the basement, either weeks or the same month that Maura went missing. And this contractor went in, and his story, I haven't spoken to him, but the story was he went into the basement to do the work, and the basement was dirt. And then he had to order a part, or I don't know what he had to do, but he had to come back at a later date to finish the job. So when he came back at a later date, not too far past the first job, the basement was cemented over. And he thought that was odd. So that's where this rumor started circulating. And people came to us and told us this. It's not like we made it up. That's what we heard. So my dad approached the owner of the house at the time, asking if he could access the basement to just do a quick search, bring a cadaver dog, and they declined. And so it wasn't for over a decade, no, more than a decade later, that the house changed ownership. And so my dad went up to the new owner and said, I'm Fred Murray, my daughter's missing right over here. Can I search your house with a cadaver dog? And the owner was very gracious and says yes. So we had 2 different cadaver dogs, 2 different handlers bring the dogs in, and they alerted in the basement. And then we took it a step further, and we had a ground penetrating radar search the area where the dogs alerted, and they found an anomaly. So we put that packet together, we sent it off to state police and said, here's what we got, consider, investigating. And so it took months and months, but eventually state police thought that there was value in checking it out, and they brought a team in there and searched the basement, and they didn't dig exactly where the dogs alerted. But they determined that it was nothing. It was, the Attorney General told us it was a dead rat or something. So,
and do you guys believe that? Or do you feel like that's sincere?
Well, based on what I know about cadaver dogs, 2 independent ones, they don't alert to. They're trained to alert only to human human remains. So I don't know.
And not just that, but like a small rat, that just seems a little, I don't know, it seems odd. But do you guys think that there is still a chance that she may be there?
I think, I don't think so.
And I remember, was it a couple of years ago? Weren't there like some bone fragments found somewhere nearby? I think at one point they thought maybe this might be Maura.
Right. So there's a ski resort that's about 20 minutes to the east in the direction that Maura was traveling. It's called Lon Mountain.
Yeah.
And I think it was 2019. I don't know. It might have not been 20. It might have been, I don't know. It's been a blur. But a few years ago, there was some human remains found up on top of the ski slope. And so we got this news and, we went right up the Hope roller coaster. We're like, this is it, because it's so close to the accident. Why are there bones up on the ski lift? And so our minds were swirling. And then the medical examiner from the state of New Hampshire went there, checked it out, and they did testing on the bones and determined that the bones that were recovered were outside the date range to be Maura. So then we
They were human bones, though?
Yes. Yeah.
And they have they since said for certainty they're not hers?
Yes, they said they're not hers. But there was also a local rumor early on that there was 3 men that called out of work that worked on Lon Mountain as ski makers. They called out of work the night Maura disappeared. And so once we heard this news a couple years ago, we're like, oh, that's it. We heard this rumor early on, and this has got to be it. And that's what happens is you go through these oscillations of getting hopeful, and then you become hopeless. So you have to really train yourself to not get too high or too low. And I said we were kind of like, oh my God, this is it. But we were in the back of our minds. I think everyone in my family was kind of like holding it back a little bit.
Right. It's like you want it to be it, but you also don't want it to be it, because that gives you that finality of an answer you probably don't want to hear or really accept, even though I think, and like you said, you guys pretty much feel that she is probably no longer with us. I think the fact that there's been no trace of her and there's been no sign of anything, you are always going to have that little bit of hope of like, well, maybe this was a really skilled and planned, event that she planned herself. I guess families are always going to have that hope, but I just can't imagine no one seeing her in 20 years. Not one person.
Yeah.
And it's like, if they have, why are they, and if there are people who say that they can say she is out there, why are they not saying anything at the same time?
Exactly, yeah. And the other thing is, she did have a cell phone at the time that she went missing. She just got it that Christmas. And this was back before everyone had cell phones. And she had one of those old school flip phones where you had to type the numbers to get the
forever. Yes. Yeah, it took 3 hours to send one text. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so she had one of those. That has never been found. But what's interesting is her last activity on her cell phone was 4:37 p.m. So you'd think if she traveled outside of that area, there would have been some sort of activity on her phone, or at least pings to it. And there wasn't. And so, what that indicates to me, and I'm no expert in this, but it indicates to me that phone never left that area where there was no service, or it was destroyed or smashed or ruined in the accident or lost. I don't know. It could be any number of those.
Did we have the capability back then in 2004 to still ping? I don't know how I don't know how it works either. I'm not, I don't know how the cell phone towers and all that work, but did the technology exist back then where if her phone was still active or on, that they would have been able to ping it still back then?
Well, what I do know is that there was a call coming inbound to Maura's phone that did ping a tower. So we have that information. So I think that if there were inbound calls, because everybody in my family was calling her dorm room and her cell phone on Tuesday once we found out. But from what I know, from what law enforcement has told me, there wasn't any additional pings after that ping that happened about 5:30-ish p.m.
That was the inbound call.
Right.
Okay, so she would have still been technically not in the situation yet. So it was like maybe the person saw the phone ring and then destroyed it. But if it happened before, then that kind of makes you wonder as well. Did you guys try calling her cell phone?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, once we got the news that she was missing on Tuesday night, the whole night we were calling.
Did it go straight to voicemail or did it ring?
Yeah, it just rang and rang and rang.
That's weird. And so it didn't show any pings or anything. That's weird.
Yeah, or not that law enforcement has shared with us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense too. Maybe they're withholding that, which is, I guess, possible. But at this point, why would they do that? But
I mean, there would have been hundreds of pings to her cell phone after Tuesday when we found out.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all of you guys, her friends, and everyone is probably going to be bombarding her cell phone trying to see if she'll answer. So yeah, I guess maybe it just overthrew the whole system or whatever. I don't know. It's possible too. So I have one more question with regards to the money she took out. Is that normal for her to withdraw cash from the ATM?
No, because back in the day, we did everything with cash. She didn't have a debit card, but in 2004 and growing up our whole life, everyone had cash.
I keep forgetting about the time frame. But yeah, 2004, we didn't all have debit cards.
We didn't have.
So my thought is like, did she take out cash in order for them to not be able to trace her purchases? Possibly, but then now it makes sense that that's probably the only way she could get money.
Yeah, that's what I believe. I mean, there was no Apple Pay back then, And the other thing is, she didn't have a smartphone, so she had written directions and hard copy maps. So. It was a whole stuff. Yeah, it was a whole different world back then.
So she had printed directions. What was the destination on the directions?
So she had handwritten directions to Burlington, not a specific address, but just to Burlington, and they were handwritten in her writing. I saw that. And she had looked up directions on her computer searches. I did a video a couple weeks ago, and I commented that she didn't have a printer, and I've been told different things from law enforcement, that they were printed or she had just done the search for them. So that's still a kind of a gray area. And one thing that I like to reiterate is, I'm telling, when I do my TikToks, I'm talking about the information that I know at the time. And I get new information all the time. And every time I meet with law enforcement, I'm trying to correct myself and fact check myself. So sometimes I say the wrong things, and it's because that's the information that I have. And
you're saying what you know.
Yeah. But then that goes on to, the web sleuths, and I'm suspicious because my story changed. Well, of course my story is going to change as I get better information.
Right. Because like you said, you only know what you know, and so you're going to say what you know, but that knowledge will change, and that's just the way the world works, really, in general. It doesn't mean you're like, oh, she's withholding information from... First of all, like, Julie, you have no responsibility to us at all to tell us anything. This is your family story. You're putting it out there, obviously, because you want to know what happened to her, and you just want her home in whatever way that may be. But like, these internet sleuths who say you're withholding something, shut up, you guys. She doesn't owe you anything. Your family owes nothing to us. In terms of every piece of information, it's annoying that people act that way.
Yeah. I guess. A lot of these cases that get a lot of publicity are treated almost like public property.
Correct.
and her whole life and my whole life and everything that I do or say, or, you know, I'm human. I make mistakes. I say the wrong thing. But, you know, the reason I do this is because I do believe that there is someone out there that knows something, and I need to reach that person. And by doing TikTok lives, I might reach that person. And, you know, it's just something that you have to do. And yeah, it definitely has its negative sides. Because if I put myself out there, there's going to be attacks, and I already know that going in. So
that's the unfortunate thing about the internet nowadays, especially. You know, we can all attest to it. You know, once you put yourself on a video, you're opening yourself to God knows what. And it's just unfortunate because, you know, your family's already been through so much, you know, and for people to come out and be like snobby or little dicks about it to you, it's just like, you just want to be like, this is so annoying. You know, it's people forget, and I forget, because I've been doing this for 2.5 years, and I forget that there are family members on the other sides of these stories. You know, Maura wasn't just Maura Murray. She was a sister, she was a daughter, she was a granddaughter, she was, you know, a friend, and it gets lost on all of us, including content creators like myself, and I have to be like reminded, and that's why I started doing this, because Patty Otto's daughter, she had reached out to me, and she kind of opened my eyes about like how you get lost in just the victim and not their story. Like you just, like you said at the very beginning of this, like people just pinpoint it to the moment, the actual incident, and they always forget about the person. And I will freely admit that I've been guilty of that. And it's, you know, it's one of those things where once you know it, you can correct it, you know, you can fix it. But there are people out there who just don't care.
There's some comments about our dogs in here. Mine is
I was like, my dogs are snoring too, so I guess
I apologize. He's anxious.
No.
Yeah.
Don't even apologize. I got like 1,000 dogs in my room, so you're good. So if the person is out there that may have done something to her, if by chance that person sees your videos or this live, what would you say to them?
I mean, it's been 20 years. Like it's been long enough. Come forward and give my family peace. And, you know, even if it's not the person that did it, whatever it is, you know, because we don't know, but someone that might have some information that they're just afraid to say or something like that. I just, you know, would try to appeal to them as a human. And, you know, if it was someone that you loved, wouldn't you want some resolution in this nightmare of living in this unknowing for 20 years? It's not like my family can go through the traditional grieving process because we don't know.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the, you know, I think whatever the 5 steps or whatever it is in the grieving process, because we're just bouncing back from frustrated, angry, you know, just always constantly bouncing between the different stages, and because we don't know. And that's something that's not talked about enough, is families and loved ones of people of missing and unsolved cases like this are really, really suffering, mostly silently, because people just don't understand that.
Right. It's because we don't have that experience that you guys have, that you are living every single day. And it's so people, again, they get lost. They don't have the empathy to like, they don't have the ability to have empathy for a situation that they don't understand, because they're not in it, I guess. But yeah, it sucks. I mean, I can't even imagine, but Is there a scenario in your head where if you could be told like where she is, but not be told who did it, is that something you would still be like, I want anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're desperate. I want anything.
So, I mean, I would say like the most important thing for you and your family is just getting Maura and getting Maura back in whatever way that is, first and foremost.
Right.
Yeah,
any answer.
Yeah, so you can always say like, you could appeal to who may know, like, we want you, but can you can always anonymously tell us where she is, where we can find her, and that's the first step, and that's what'll help your family in the now. It doesn't mean you guys stop looking for whoever did it, but it's always like, what's the most important thing, I guess, is to get Maura home, because that way you guys can start the proper grieving process. Because and it sucks because your mom and your sister, like, they didn't get to find out what happened, and that just that adds to it, and that adds to your trauma and your dad's trauma and the rest of your family's trauma, and that's awful.
Yeah, it is awful. And my dad's, he's 81 now, and the whole
he looks good for 81, by the way.
He does look good for 81. He's kept himself in really good shape, and but it's just sad for me to see him have to go through this, and this is not what he wanted for his life, and this is not what I wanted for my life. But I really want some sort of resolution for him, because he's literally dedicated his life for this, just to get an answer. And we're still in that gray area, and that gray area really, really sucks.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, not alone being a sibling, but being a parent. If anything, you got to do it his name's Fred, right? Yeah. Fred? Yeah. You got to do it for Fred. You got to help Fred find his daughter, like he deserves that closure. You deserve that closure. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a family member to a victim, but you are. Is closure a real thing?
Yeah, in real estate.
Is it a real thing in this situation?
No, there's no such thing as closure for a family of missing and unsolved cases, because this alters your whole life the minute it happens, and you'll never be the same. Everything is different. To say that if we find Maura, that's resolution. That's not closure, because look at how it's impacted my entire life, or 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
So no, closure is not the right word.
Right. Even with all the answers, closure is not the proper way to describe it. It's more of just really what it sounds like. It's more of just like, we have the answers, but that doesn't make it better. It may be solved, but it doesn't solve the issue, so to speak. Yeah. Someone asked me, by the way, I forgot to ask this. This is totally random and off topic here now, but there was something in her tailpipe.
Yeah, there is a rag in her tailpipe.
And what did that mean?
Well, her car was smoking, and it had broken down over Christmas break, or right around Christmas break. And so my dad knew, and Maura knew, that this car is no good and we need to get a new car. So my dad, in his infinite wisdom, said, hey, I heard this technique. I don't know if it will work. It probably won't work. But if you stuff a rag in the tailpipe, it will mitigate some of that smoking, because if the cops see that smoke, they're obligated to pull you over. So if he said, do not drive this car, but if you have to, and you need to go short distances around campus or whatever, you could try this technique. It probably won't work, but do not drive this car. So there was a rag in the back of her car. It was one of the an old work towel that my dad he kind of collected. He used to work at the VA, and so he'd take these towels for. He was a marathon runner, so he'd have these towels for after his run. And so one of those towels was found stuffed inside the tailpipe.
And that didn't really, I mean, that to you guys didn't really have any relevance to the situation. That's just, right? I mean, you don't think that had anything to do with anything?
Well, what it meant to me was that the car probably had started smoking.
Oh, okay.
And so she's like, "Oh, Dad said to put this rag in the tailpipe, and I could, avoid police."
And the car actually still worked, right?
Yeah.
It was drivable.
Yeah, so the car was taken from the accident scene on Monday night, towed to the personal garage of the tow operator, which is a whole nother story. Yeah, and it sat in the tow operator's personal garage for some time, but my dad was able to see the car on Friday. So she disappeared on Monday. My dad sees the car on Friday. He knew that there was a spare key on a magnet underneath the stairwell, or not the tire well. So he grabs the spare key, gets in the car, and it starts right up. And so he was like, that's odd. So then he puts it in drive and goes like a couple inches forward. He obviously is in the garage, and then puts it in reverse, and it goes a couple inches. So it was drivable. So why didn't she drive away?
Right. Was it stuck in anywhere when she first, I mean, as far as you guys know, like, was it stuck in a position where she couldn't have gotten out of the ditch on her own, or is it a scenario where she could have just started the car and drove?
Well, we think that the car was in the ditch, and we think that she extracted it out of the ditch because the first witness, the Westmans, said that it looked like it was just parked on the side of the road. Right. It didn't. It was out. It was on the road, and it didn't look like it was a bad accident. It might not have been the Westmans who said that, but one of the witnesses said it didn't look like a bad accident. The car was up on the road. So I don't know. Maybe that's when she realized, oh no, I don't have cell service. I just told the bus driver I don't need help because I called AAA when my intention was to call AAA, but I didn't realize I didn't have service. Now I need to get the hell out of here and then take the next opportunity to do that. Because people say, if she was going to accept help, she would accept it from the bus driver.
Yeah.
Maybe, but if she didn't realize she did not have cell service, maybe she thought, I'll just call AAA.
Do you think he would have confronted her about like him lying? Like he knows she didn't call because about cell signal. Do you think there's a scenario where he's like, well, that's not true because we don't have cell signal here? Like,
yeah, he didn't mention that in any of his recounting of the situation. So
do you feel any suspicion towards him at all?
I don't think that he was a big guy, and his wife lived right there with him. His mother lived there with him. I don't know if he knows more or saw more than he stated, but I don't think that he did anything. I think maybe he might have known something, but I don't think. Yeah,
I guess that makes sense. I mean, his wife was right there, and so she would have noticed. Obviously, had he just done something or brought someone to their home, like she would have noticed. So I guess that makes sense. I don't know. He just always seemed really like shaky to me. Like maybe he is or was hiding something about knowing something.
Yeah, I mean, he's shaky because he gave different variations of his encounter.
Right.
So he made himself suspicious by doing that. So he says at one point he gets off the bus, at one point he stays on the bus. He gives a story of where she's sitting in the car with the airbag, like the airbag's deployed. One version where she's standing up outside the car. And then
those are big discrepancies.
I know. Yeah, I know. And then some reporters said that attributed him as saying she was slurring her speech and she was holding on to the car for stability. But he came back and said, I never said that. I didn't say that she appeared to be intoxicated. So then, this was all like the night of. All these, the witnesses are all over the place with their initial reports of what they saw. And so that's another huge frustrating point for my family. It's like we can't even get the straight story from the witnesses that were there.
Those three houses, do you know by chance, were they like friends? Did they like know each other well? Could they have been covering for each other kind of thing?
It doesn't seem that way. I thought that they would be neighborly because it's New Hampshire. And when I think of New Hampshire, I think of, happy camping, hiking, everyone's friendly. When you're hiking in New Hampshire, you do the typical hi to everyone on the trail. So I just assumed that they were neighborly. But from what I've learned, it doesn't seem like they really knew each other at all.
Oh, okay. I want to say, sometimes from the movies, I hear small towns are like the creepiest places to go, but then that's also just the movies. So it's like, yeah, that's why I wonder, I always kind of wondered if the three of them, just sort of knew more and they were all collectively hiding it together. But I guess that doesn't seem totally plausible, But I know it's just a lot of you're going to have to deal with so much speculation and stuff, but. So are you guys doing anything for the 20th vigil?
No, we typically do the same thing every year. But this year we rented what's called the Mountain Lakes Lodge, and it's a lodge about a mile from where the accident scene is. And, it's going to be cold. It's New Hampshire. It's February. It's probably going to be snowing or raining. So that'll give people a place to kind of gather, get warm, get some food, chat with us, chat with each other. Remember Maura, tell stories. And so we'll be doing that on February 9th, which is a Friday this year. So everyone's going to be welcome. So we'll do that.
Do you usually have a lot of locals that show up to that?
We have a fair amount of locals. Yeah, most of the locals there are fabulous and really, really good people, and have gone out of their way to help us. There's a few that are not happy with the attention, and I get it. It's people go to New Hampshire and particularly that area to have their privacy, and I respect that, and we don't want to bother any of them or cause any issues for them. But yeah, there's been tons of locals that, still keep in contact, have become really good family friends, send us information and tips all the time. And, they're up there, boots on the ground, and they hear things. I'm never going to hear down in Virginia. Yeah. So
you got your inside sources technically, there. So that's good. Do you and your family feel that one day there will be a conclusion to this? Do you guys feel that?
Yeah, we have to, because if we don't, then, we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. Yeah. Because if we lose that hope, then I don't even want to think about that. So yeah, we always hold out that hope. But it's interesting because, and I've talked about this before, is that relationship with hope where it changes. And, the hope the hope now going into the 20th year of Maura being missing isn't that we don't really believe that she's going to walk through that door. So our hope now is we hope that we get some sort of answers. Yeah. Whereas the first year, that the hope relationship was totally different. We never in a million years thought that this would go on for more than a couple days. You know, we thought that she would just show up. We could never fathom that it would be 20 years and we would still have no answers.
Yeah.
So all we have to keep us going and to fuel us is the hope that we can get resolution.
Yeah. And I feel with today's climate, with today's world, with today's technology, that I think there is an increasing likelihood that you will get that resolution. I mean, it's insane what our forensic technology can do nowadays. I mean, it's insane. And so you're kind of hoping for that one new thing, that one new trick they come up with that can somehow lead you to at least where she is, you know, something like that. And I have covered cases before where it's like, I don't want you guys waiting 40, 50 years, but it's, you know, you have like that 40 years ago it happened and there's a resolution at some point down the road. And it is very, very, very possible. You know, we're solving cases from the 30s and 40s that didn't even, you know, there was virtually no evidence, but they found evidence because of technology. And so that's why I'm glad like her car is still in existence, because you never know what they could do with it.
Right.
You never know. Because that's the last place she was her car. And that's got to have something. Do you have the belongings from her car? Or are they still in it?
No. The police initially gave us back the belongings that they didn't take from the search warrant. So they had a search warrant executed on Tuesday, and they took a number of things from the car. But the rest of the items that were in the car were given back to my family. And then 6 months later in June, the New Hampshire State Police showed up at my sister Kathleen's house and repossessed all those items. So we don't have any of it. We just have what was in her dorm room, and I have a lot of that stuff with me.
I forgot to ask about that. Her dorm room, weren't there like people were confused because there were boxes packed, but people thought that meant she was leaving, but the reality is that she was probably hasn't unpacked yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I believe, because my little brother Curtis and my mother went to visit Maura right after she moved into her dorm, or got back from winter break, and everything was still boxed up. And my brother Curtis was there, and you know, he said this. And then once the dorm photos were released, again for the Oxygen show, not to my family, Curtis looked at those photos and he said, that's not how her room looked when I saw it when she first moved in, indicating that she had started the process of unpacking her boxes. So I believe that she just hadn't finished unpacking.
Yeah, because that goes into like the narrative of, because that changes things too, because if we're like, oh, she was packing, she was planning to leave, and you have people that run with these ideas, but you just gotta like, you gotta swat those people to the side and say, go away.
Yeah.
So I guess to finish up, is there anything you want to add or anything you want to say at all about, you know, your sister or her case?
Well, I could talk for hours about
yeah.
sister. But what I do want to say is thank you for taking such an empathetic approach and giving families the platform to talk about our loved ones firsthand, because we have the most at stake. Yeah. And these other creators, well, the majority of them are trying to help. Sometimes they don't. And, you know, I have a story to tell, whether you like it or not. You know, I knew Maura. I am her sister. I have experienced loss in her absence. So I appreciate you giving me this platform. The other thing that I'll mention is obviously empathy is my big thing. And I started the Engage with Empathy campaign. It's an awareness campaign to remind people that these are not just cases that you listen to while you're driving to work or cleaning your house or doing your workout. But these are real humans, not only the victims, but the secondary victims, the families that are living this nightmare every day. And you should be a decent human and treat us with a little bit of empathy.
There is always more than one victim in every single case. There's always more than one. You have the victim themselves, but then you have, like you just said, the secondary, the family, and it gets lost so much, unfortunately.
Yeah, no one misses Maura more than I do and my family, and we're the ones that have to suffer with her absence.
Yeah. One day you will get the answers. I feel confidence that one day you will get her back, and you will be able to at least start a new chapter, I guess. I don't want to say move on, because you're never going to move on, but you'll begin a new chapter in life, and you'll be able to say that you did everything in your freaking power to make sure Maura is never forgotten and to make sure that Maura was found. And that's a level of strength that I can't fathom having, because I'm not in this situation, but you were forced into this scenario, unwillingly. But I admire the strength and the just overall the passion you have for this. And I don't know, I'm almost speechless. It's always so incredible when you hear the actual victims' family members talk about it and you see them as people. And it's just like, it never ceases to amaze me, like how strong you guys are. And I thank you for being just who you are.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, I get it from my dad and my mom.
Your dad's a character.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap this up then. And so what I've been doing is I've been posting these to my YouTube. They don't get a whole lot of views on YouTube, but just so they're always there. So if you can always tell people if they wanted to watch it, they weren't able to see it live, that it'll be available. I don't know when. I'll probably in a few days or so, but it'll be up soon. So
Okay. Awesome. I can't thank you enough. I was so happy when you asked me to do this.
Oh yeah. Of course. But I'm sure we'll talk again soon. And so thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you sharing Maura's story. And keep fighting. Keep being strong. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you everyone that joined.
Yes.
All right. Take care.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.